My name is Vrushti Mody, and I'm currently pursuing my master's in computer science with a data science concentration from University of Massachusetts Amherst, which is in Amherst, MA. And yeah, I've always been very interested with computer programming and ML/AI side of things, using technology to build solutions to solve real world problems. So that's the reason I decided to go ahead and pursue my MS.
I'm a PhD student. I'm towards the end of my third year. I study data science at NYU, which is New York University. I'm also based in New York. I study at the Center for Data Science, and I work on social networks, studying misinformation, approaches to stop misinformation from spreading on social networks. I think the extracurriculars and grades have far more weightage than essays, primarily because they already reflect what you have done better than you can describe it typically. It's easy to write a very long-winded essay, but it's really hard to write a short essay that focuses exactly on the points that you want to put across, saying these are the experiences I have and this is why I want to pursue a college degree.
I think that everything is given equal weightage when it comes to reviewing the application. But then there are two things that you cannot change, which is your GPA and your past experience. So then you mostly have to focus on your scores like GRE and TOEFL and how well you write your statement of purpose.
Extracurriculars vary. So I would say the most important parts of your extracurriculars are research, what experiences you have working at different companies and what you have pursued, the kinds of projects you have pursued at these companies. Grades come in a close second, primarily because research already showcases that you are capable of pursuing a graduate level course or pursuing graduate level thesis research.
So extracurricular does have weightage when it comes to reviewing the entire application, but you have to kind of knit it well together with your statement of purpose. Just random things mentioned here and there don't really add up when it comes to your application. So if you just mention that I won a singing competition, which in no way relates to your entire statement of purpose, then it doesn't make sense. But yeah, if you kind of put it well together with your entire statement, then it does add a lot of value to your statement.
Nevertheless, I used the help of an education counselor called Reach IV. They were pretty good at what they do. And they helped me draft up an application for masters. I got into UCLA, which is the University of California, Los Angeles, for a master's. Regardless, I chose to go off and do my job in Switzerland. And the year after that, I applied for PhD and got into NYU. And I had a master's sort of offer at the University of Oxford, but I chose NYU over that.
Yeah, I did take help from Education USA. So it is the official study abroad thing that the US government has in India for students. So they don't write SOPs or LORs or anything for you, but they guide you with, selection of your colleges based on your profile, and they review your SOP and LOR for you and give you comments. My biggest challenge was that I was not really sure what if I wanted to do my master's right now or like after 2 years of work experience. So I started my entire process very late. So it was very difficult for me to manage everything on time. I missed quite a few application deadlines because not everything was ready. So I think that the most important thing is to have a clear head as to what you want to do, work experience or MS, and start doing your GRE and TOEFL tests early and start writing your applications in early.
I think the biggest challenge for me was having the clarity to express why I want to get into college and what I want to do in college, because that's really hard to put into words if you don't already have the clarity. For me, the primary reason was I realized the master's degree was not worth it in terms of the time I would get to study things. And so I wanted to do a PhD, sort of extend the time I would spend working on things. And expressing the reason like why I want to do a PhD explicitly was really hard, because you need to do a lot of research around the areas you want to get into and why you want to pursue a specific degree. I basically used a lot of online materials, specifically Magoosh, Words, Barron's Words. I think I did a bunch of Kaplan tests and Manhattan Prep, the usual 5LB book. I would highly recommend taking practice tests at home in the same conditions that you would take them in the exam hall, because for me, sitting in AC for a couple of hours was a big challenge. And it's really hard to do that if you're not used to it beforehand.
So I had given both GRE and TOEFL, and for GRE, there are a lot of textbooks available to practice, and then there are a lot of practice tests available as well. So I had given a lot of practice tests throughout like 2 to 3 months, and for most of the verbal side of things, I had used Magoosh for grammar. And for TOEFL as well, there are tests available. But then I feel like if you prepare well enough for GRE, then you don't have much problem with TOEFL.
So college applications are quite expensive. Typically, it takes $100, 75 to 100 US dollars per application. However, the catch is that a bunch of universities have financial assistance. So if you actually write to the admissions departments with a well-framed email, not very odd type of email, then they are likely to waive the application fee if you justify it with enough reason for them to do so.
So applications are quite expensive. They range from like $80 per application to $150. So it's very important to shortlist the universities correctly. You also have to spend to send your GRE and TOEFL scores to these colleges. So both GRE and TOEFL allow you to send up to 4 scores for free, but you have to decide when you give the exam is like at that very moment. So it's better if you have your entire list ready, so that if you say suppose apply to 10 universities, then at least 4 of them get done beforehand. And yeah, so like if there are 2 universities with a rank of 20, then I suggest just apply to one of them, so that you have a better chance at applying to both ambitious, safe and moderate universities.
I think there is a lack of clarity for a lot of people who are moving abroad, and that kicks in really late. Once you move abroad, you realize that, oh, there is things are very different from what you imagined them to be, and your goals not being clear really play into that. For example, if you go into a smaller city and you're very used to living in a big city with family around you, you're suddenly hit by the isolation. So my biggest advice to people who are going abroad is have the clarity and set your expectations right as to where you are going and why you are going there.
So the first is the location, because the cost of living depends on the location. And second, the rank of the university, because obviously you don't want your university to be a very low rank university, because then it'll get difficult to get an internship or a job. But then overall, I feel like if it's the university is in top 50 or top 100, then it doesn't really matter. And third is like the safety, because you have to see how safe the state that you are going to is, or the climatic conditions. Like Michigan is too cold, and I don't think that I would have been able to tolerate that weather. So I decided not to apply to universities over there.
For me, the primary challenges around visas have been I've worked in sort of iffy areas from a government perspective. So I always undergo background checks when I apply for visas to different places. It always gets approved, but it takes a month or 2 months. And so when I applied for my US visa in Switzerland, it took them about 2 months more than originally planned to approve the visa. That being said, I had a good support system, so I was able to continue working in Switzerland for an extended period of time. But if that hadn't been the case, I would have been in a really dicey spot.
So I had practiced a lot for my visa interview because I was really nervous, and I was just all of the people who apply to universities have these visa group where you see where the slots are open. So firstly, it's very important to find the right slot on time, because the closer you get to the start date of your university, the more tensed you are. And I don't know. I have been very lucky. I was just asked a question or two, and I was just given the visa. But I've had friends who answered all the questions correctly, and yet they were rejected. So I just feel that you should have your set of documents in place. And with even with visa interviews, there are lots of interviews available on Google and YouTube, where you can check what questions they answer and what questions they ask, and you should like be prepared and answer accordingly.
So one of the things for PhDs is that they're typically free, which is a very important part of you spending 4 or 5 years of your life doing this kind of research at not very well paid positions all the time. So for me, the tuition is free and I get a living stipend, which is really quite reasonable considering I'm living in New York City. I would say typically tuition ranges around $72,000 at NYU per year, the I-20 amount, if I remember correctly. That includes $48,000 in tuition and $20,000 to $30,000 in living expenditure that they expect you to have. But typically, students end up spending much less on living. So the fees come out to be a little less than that.
So my average tuition fee is around $19,000 per semester. And then the cost of living goes up to $800 to $1,000 a month. So, and I think that my state is like one of the moderate states. If I was in New York, then it would have been much higher. If I would have been in some state like South Carolina, then it would have been a little lower.
I am on scholarship. I'm funded by the lab that I work at, and they have a variety of sources that they use to fund my education. The typical way to get scholarships, though, is you apply to a specific scholarship, submit a couple of essays, submit your resume, your motivation statement, and your research statement. For PhD students, there are explicitly a bunch of different scholarships by tech companies, by organizations, by universities themselves that they apply for. The way you would go about finding them for masters is a bit more difficult because there are very specific scholarships. For example, India has a couple of scholarships for students going abroad in art, architecture, other fields.
I'm not on any scholarships right now, but there are a lot of scholarships available, scholarships provided by India, and a lot of universities provide scholarships too. So I was really late to apply to any of them because, like I said, made my decision really late. But if people have their entire application done and if they have their admits, then I think that Ratan Tata has a scholarship, then KG Mahindra has a scholarship. So there are a lot of scholarships available, and if they Google it on the internet, they'll find it really easily.
So the living expenses in New York vary a lot. Specifically, Manhattan, where I live, is the most expensive kind of location. You could also live in Queens, which is nearby, or Brooklyn, which is also another borough, or Jersey City, where a lot of Indian students tend to stay, given the proximity to Indian grocery stores and the community.
Yeah, like I said, it goes up to $1,000 a month. And yeah, but then it again depends on how lavishly you live. So if you've taken an entire room to yourself, then your rent must be a little higher. If you've decided to stay in the living room, then your rent would be a little lower. So I think cost of living can be adjusted based on how much you would like to spend per.
So, like I said, for me, the PhD is fully funded and I get a living stipend. So, effectively, I'm not relying on external funding or personal funding to pay for my college degree. That being said, for a master's, I would have considered either taking a loan or taking money from family to sort of pay off the amounts given that I wouldn't be paid.
So for most of it, like my parents are sponsoring my tuition fee, and for like my living expenses, I'm doing an on-campus job. And I think most of the people do it that way because it becomes easier that way. So, because whenever you take money from India to USA, you always have to pay a fee, and the education cost does go a little high. So it's better if you manage the living on your own. And I think there are a lot of on-campus jobs available in each college, which range from common dining jobs, which anyone can get, to a TA or RA position. So I think everyone should try to look for on-campus jobs.
I think my most important message would be have the clarity of why you want to go abroad. If it is money and a better job, that is absolutely a good reason to go abroad. If it is getting an education to learn more about your subject, that is also a perfect reason to go abroad. But if you don't have that clarity and you don't set your expectations right, you're going to end up in situations where you're not comfortable. And that is the number one reason I've seen Indian students face a hard time surviving abroad more than going abroad. I think a lot of people are very easily able to go abroad, but it's more about the experience you have and making that an enjoyable time for you.
So I think that my decision of going to pursue my master's just after my undergrad, I think it was a really good decision, because I have friends who've taken work experience, and I feel like at this point I know as much as they do. And I would say that it's a really nice experience, because you just don't learn the education curriculum side of things. You learn to become independent, both like with your studies, financially, everything, at a very young age. So I have been given the responsibility to manage all my finances. I decide when I wake up, I decide when I go to sleep, I decide. No one is here to supervise you. There are no tuitions as such. You just have to make sure that you do everything right by yourself. And I think that at this point in my life, I'm glad that I took this decision, because it makes you really, really independent. Do my parents count?
Funnily enough, my brother is a source of massive support for me, and I really miss him. Actually, I don't crave a lot of Indian food because I cook decently and I can make most of the food here. That being said, I think Mithi Bai's grilled sandwich.
Pani puri.
I'm hard at choosing favorites, but I would pick spending time playing football in the building with my building friends. Probably visit Mithi Bai and get grilled sandwich.
I would have my mom ke haath ka khana. I just miss it too much.
I like to sketch, and these days I like to do bouldering or indoor climbing. There's this activity that seems to be really famous in the tech community here, so I'm a stereotype.
I like to read a book or play the ukulele.